My name is Sherry Bartram. Welcome to Viewpoints podcast, brought to you by Equiture, the leading provider of public safety software and training. We are an international leader in public safety training and technology with products geared toward providing tools to help responders stay safe and educated. For those of you who are new to our podcast, we offer these podcasts with a variety of guests geared toward public safety topics, as well as monthly webinars. Today on our show, we are talking with Maureen Dykeman, known throughout the industry as Mo. She is the founder and CEO of Moetivations. For those who don't know also, Mo grew up in public servants and chose a career in public safety through leadership roles for companies that provide computer hardware, software, and telecommunication systems to 911 centers nationwide. Then in 2012, she pivoted her career and founded Moetivations and is helping 911 agencies and public safety vendors improve efficiencies and organizational performances across the nation. Wow, it's great to have you here, Mo.
Thank you.
Today, we're going to be discussing multiple generations found within the PSAP. I feel, Mo, like this topic has had a lot of media attention, but people seem to really tend to focus on stereotypes like, oh, there's a baby boomer, or that's a Generation Xer. And I know our goal for this podcast will be not only to steer away from stereotypes specifically, but how we can encourage professionalism in the workplace. Would you agree with that goal?
Yes. Stereotypes tend to throw up walls between people in trying to understand how they approach life and work and professionalism. And as soon as someone feels labeled, they want to come out from underneath that label and become an individual and be recognized as a human and individual that's different and unique. And as soon as we stereotype a group, we throw up all those walls, and it kind of becomes a barrier to understanding each other. Yeah, for sure. We're going to steer away from that today.
Good. Do you think people, when they feel stereotyped, they'll either, work hard to overcome it, or in some cases, people just they just give up?
I think it depends on the generation and the person. If you're labeled, and it's been happening for years, and you can hear it back in even in the good old days where people would say "man up" or "put your big girl panties on," and so it's not only age groups that get kind of grouped together, but genders and types. And what happens is people don't always fit into that label or that role, and they don't want to be grouped together and then not approached as an individual. So I think it's important to figure out what throws up the walls and the defensive posturing and the coming out from underneath that label. And instead of saying you're a millennial or watching funny videos on millennials and how they behave, start trying to understand how that person in front of you approaches the problem or the solution or the life or event or the challenge, and start understanding how to support each other regardless of all of those labels and groupings.
I I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, because as you said that, put on your big girl panties. I've definitely heard that one. Suck it up, buttercup. I've
Mm-hmm.
had that one said to me, and I almost hate to admit that I have had that come out of my mouth. So the generational differences within a PSAP has definitely picked up interest over the past few years. But in discussing this with you, you have approached this in such a refreshing way, not wanting to stereotype any one generation at all. And I think that's great. So I'd like it if you could talk a little bit about the different generations and the strengths that they bring, because I think we forget to focus on the strengths, and instead we just kind of be negative. So
Yeah.
can you do that?
I saw an interview recently, and it kind of just goes right to your point, Cherie, that we do focus on the negativity, and we grow negative thinking and negative speak, and we don't necessarily grow positive or see the good or call out the good in the others. It's interesting to share stories. I mean, all you have to do is mention United Airlines, and everyone's got a story of a terrible flight. And so, but
Yes.
that's not true for everyone, and it's not true for the totality of the airline industry. They all equally struggle, and I choose that as an analogy or an example because everybody can understand it, and everybody understands that there's struggle with travel, and there's also good things that happen with travel. But we don't necessarily call out the good things. One, it approaches the opposite of what people are normally griping and commiserating about, and it just feels like venting and all this stuff. You just get it off your shoulders, and everyone can agree with you and chime in and pile on. But when we take that same type of increasing negative speak and we point it towards people, we start to group them together, and it grows resentment and bitterness, but it also grows a significant misunderstanding of how we are as individuals and unique people. So then, when you zero all the way down into a PSAP, um, and you're looking right there at that space, one, they've been looked down to for a long time in the pecking order, and they already suffer from years of not having or not feeling recognition and elevation. And so there is a lot of media, back to your earlier point, on these topics because the industry is moving away from looking down and looking equally to comm centers as being first responders. And but years of feeling disrespected has kind of grown some of that foundational negativity, and it takes a long time for an agency, and it takes work and practice to pull out of that constant negative thinking and negative speak. So, instead of someone being told, be more positive, we have to help them think less negativity. There already is going to be enough in their space from what they're doing as a job. And there's already enough grown in the foundational layer of years of feeling low man on the totem pole and disrespected to elevating and saying this isn't good for us, and practice our understanding of each other in those generations. So if we elevate understanding instead of scolding someone for what they're saying or looking at them as being different and calling them names like a millennial, we start saying, wow, we could learn from each other. What a concept. We open our minds to learn from each other. And it is a two-way street. First of all, traditionals and the older generation and the more senior and experienced, they had very structured learning and classroom style. They worked traditional hours. Their parents worked 9 to 5, and they sometimes held on to information and as job security and did not dole it out to people unless they felt like they deserved it or earned it. They also had a lot of roles that were very structured and predefined in their work. They slowly got into technology. They didn't always, back in the day, have mouse and computers. Email became, slowly growing, and they didn't communicate except voice and face to face and email. And and they also had a corporate ladder and a career development, and they landed someplace and they stayed there for a long time. And so that is a traditional workforce. They understand overworking, and they say yes to a lot of things, their boss, their schedule, their responsibilities, and they sacrifice sometimes their own minutes and their own time. And so when you look at generations coming into the workforce that were raised differently and work differently, we don't necessarily seek to understand, wow, that person's very experienced and exhausted. And that person's not looking at that person saying, wow, they're very experienced in technology and not exhausted. And they don't look to understand each other. They sometimes start trying to make each other exactly like I am. I need you to work like I do, or um, I need you to have work life balance like I do, and I need you to understand me, not me understand you. And so we have to kind of get out of some of those ways of thinking and say, not all of these questions are irrelevant. If you're very busy comm center and somebody says, "Can I leave early because I have a date?" That's not a cause for scolding and name calling or resentment. It's not a stupid question. Why did they ask the question? Because they're thinking about their personal schedule and it's a priority to them, and that's okay. And so we get rid of the stereotype that everyone should work their butts off and never have a life, and start moving into understanding that the evolution of the employees are now they understand career development. They use devices everywhere. They communicate on text and pictures and Instagram and on email, and not as often on voice on the phone as some generations. They're also trained at an early age to figure out leadership, and they do learning instead of structure. They do learning on video and scenarios and even podcasts like this. And they're a little bit more outside the box thinking in how they work. They like to work from home. They like flexibility. And when I say they, it's a generation of group of people that's the same head count as baby boomers coming into the workforce. And it's like learning a different language. But how you figure that out is you start understanding the person that's in front of you, as opposed to trying to put them into a group and then treating them accordingly. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense. Just, I was really laughing when you said, "Can I get off work because I have a date?" Um, I can, I can only imagine having that said in a PSAP, and different people how they would
Well,
respond to that.
Cherie, I can only imagine the look on your face if someone asked that of you, right? Because you're in the experience level of probably not asking a question like that. And so you would be surprised by it. Also, the thought wouldn't occur to you if the shift is hitting the fan that it would be okay to leave early, right? And so when you look at how people approach the idea of someone getting up and leaving while it's busy, there's feelings about that. And the feelings about that start with negativity. They
Right?
don't say, gee, I wish I could learn how to leave. And they shouldn't be leaving because don't they know that we're busy? And the seriousness comes into it. And so instead of having them feel disciplined or scolded or in trouble, having them understand what happens in a comm center when you're busy, and creating flexibility in leaving to have a break instead of leaving to drive home. And then also, as a person that never leaves early, um, pick a day where you actually discipline yourself to leave early and see how good it feels, and pick a day when it's not busy and sign off early. And then the first feeling you'll have, especially if you're working too much, is guilt. and so
Right. I was, yes.
and so how do you overcome that? And that's where we start adapting to understanding how people approach it. And that's the important part, because you're going to have people very dedicated and energetic and passionate, and they have feelings about that. And you're going to also have people that toe the line and do what they're told, and don't think outside the box. But you're also going to have people that say, why can't we do it differently? And in a comm center, there has been some stick to itiveness, stick in the mud. There's a lot of sticky, and this is the way we've always done it.
Um,
And the younger generation coming in is challenging that thought process, and that's okay. And it's okay to challenge the way that we've always done it in order to create adult-based module learning programs, scenario practice, phasing in and building confidence instead of over disciplining, and morale boosting, and constant engagement in how we're doing. And then we start moving away from cliches and slogans, suck it up, buttercup, and things like that, because they did damage and they threw up walls in understanding. And that takes practice.
Yeah. And I have even said change is the only constant in life. So better to embrace it because, you know, that's it's change is the only thing we have. And I have a funny story to tell you about the can I leave early. We had a supervisor years ago, and there was a huge storm coming toward the PSAP, and she said, "I need to leave early because the storm is coming, and I need to get home to my family." And you would have thought she had committed a crime, um, because the supervision is being trained by, I can't remember how you described my generation, but
Traditionals.
traditional, yes. The supervision is being trained by them, so that's kind of where their mindset is, and that's how they responded to this person, her peers, and
Mhm.
it wasn't pretty, that
Well, I think
response.
the same that so you just look at the example, right? But the example starts to repeat itself. If somebody walked out on the floor and said they're trying to elevate their career and start applying where they can be supervisors or managers or go into the vendor world, sometimes they're shamed in now you're going to leave us or you're going to the dark side. I mean, there's a lot of cliche
Yes.
comments that are pulling people down. But if you look, so take the label off and look at your generation coming into the workforce as an understanding that career growth is important to them. They were raised by people that understood the career ladder, right? And they also want flexibility, and that helps them focus on work and productivity. There's this group that understands that people can work from home, and they see it, right? They see the commercials on TV, people working from home, where from here up they're dressed, and from here down they got boxer shorts on, and they also understand this generation coming in as they grow up. And they've been taught in school, and it's not a stereotype. They have learned that we are not supposed to name call and intimidate and push and cyberbully, and they have a lot of education in the way that they were raised on workplace quality, how we treat each other, professionalism, and that there's trouble that circles around people that are treating other people poorly, name calling, pushing, shoving, stealing, intimidation, texting, Facebook haters. There's all of these things that they understand are not okay. So when you come into a PSAP, your emotionally charged environment, it's a stressful environment. It's years of not necessarily given permission to self care or even skills and resources to self care and stress management. And now, back to your earlier point, the media is focusing, and the sessions and conferences are focusing on caring for each other. And in caring for each other, we have to be willing to meet food, rest, and sleep, and the basic needs of humans. So if we're overworking them, we have to care for their food, rest, and sleep, and walking and taking a break. And so that means that we have to be okay with people getting up and taking a break instead of shaming them. But also, if here's the flip side of that coin, Cherie, is if I walked up to you and you were working your butt off and you were powering through your shift and I said it's time to take a break, you might actually turn to me and say, I'm fine. And I'm like,
Yes.
it's time for you to take a break. And you're like, I don't need one. And I'm like, but you do. And what are you saying? I'm grumpy. I'm saying it's not good for you to sit for 12 hours straight and shame others for taking a break and then never take one yourself. You've got to walk, and your blood needs to flow, and your head needs to clear, and you need sunshine, and you need fresh
Yes.
air. It's a human thing. It doesn't have anything to do with your work quality, but will affect your work quality if you don't, and it'll affect your face and your grumpiness and your wrinkles. And
Right.
By the way, I'm fine is a four-letter F word. So, people probably stop saying it. So there's that basic need of physiological, and you got to meet it. And when you're emotionally charged and sitting and stressed and adrenaline is hitting you, getting up and walking is not a bad thing, and it's not a sign of weakness or that you can't do your stuff. And so we have to remove that stigma of asking for help is a sign of weakness, and getting up and walking. And um, people whisper to me, I'm so glad we're taking breaks. I really need one and I feel better. And they used to make me feel guilty. And that's what we got to walk away from. We got to get rid of that way that we've been doing it. And you can tell when you get up and walk and you get up and go do something, you come back, that you approach it differently and your mindset's clear. And that's why it's so important to hear that someone's offering help and be okay with it, and then also ask for help and be okay with it.
Yeah. I I love to hear you say that. I've argued with people about exactly what you're saying. Um, the dispatchers need a break. Why do they need a break? I never had a break. I sat here for 12 hours and no, no, they actually need a break. So and having
So
to
wait, so
force
wait,
those breaks.
so wait. I
Um,
just got to say, just a second. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
no, no,
but
no, no, that's fine.
the person that says, I never took a break, I sat here for 12 hours, that's where we say, instead of talking about they need a break, say, you know what? I'm sorry that no one told you should have gotten up. And also, look what it's done to us, right? Instead of you and pointing a finger. If someone says that to you, Cherie, I never took a break, I never needed one, that's actually not true. You did need one. And look what it did. It caused premature aging. It caused wrinkles and weight gain and high blood pressure and insomnia and migraines and anxiety and clearly irritability, because look at you now, and and that's where we stop saying, yes, they need a break. We start saying, you've needed one for so long, and we've got to learn a different way of doing things. Today's way of doing things is the opposite of all of that burnout, and it's giving a lot of attention and treating people with respect and helping them manage their workloads and acknowledging their efforts and recognizing that they showed up, and even though they smell bad, and fostering trust. And that's where we've got to start changing the way, instead of pulling the past forward and saying this is the way. We've got to start changing the way, and that means listening and hearing and understanding and caring, and that takes practice. I'm sorry, I had to just
No,
that person. Yeah,
I don't disagree with that. I think when I think about that person, um, it was really forced on that person also to take the breaks, and um, you know, I can't say whether they did it willingly or not, but they finally did go that way. But
yeah.
what do you feel like what do you feel blocks people from accepting strengths from the different generations, especially maybe the newer generations who have, I love the way you described that, they have all these expectations of the workforce. You're not going to shame me by calling me names or making me feel bad about myself and my beliefs. And I mean, that's important, but it's not really well accepted in every place. Why is why are those blocks there? What do you think?
Well, I think it's because there is some percentages of judgment, and even I experienced that personally because I was raised in technology and 911 systems and CAD, and helping people move forward and showing people how to use a mouse and a keyboard and multiple mice and keyboards, And then I moved into trying to help people in wellness and stress management and hearing how they're doing and helping them feel better so they do better and creating this feedback loop of attention and training and coaching and engagement. And I still, even after all these years of studying people and going to school and trying to figure out the culture and the organizational management, I will still have judgments put on if I'm allowed to talk about these things because I didn't sit as a dispatcher for many years, and you're on the outside. You're not one of us, and even though I've been studying it my whole life and living in it my whole life with my family being in public safety and the arguments that happen around the dining room table and watching their people's personal lives be destroyed because of the stress of different parts of the industry. My one brother being in an ambulance, my other brother being in a police car, my dad a fire chief, and my mom a trauma room nurse and ER nurse. All of those things. You can see what it does to your personal life and your professional life and how it makes you as a person and how you engage with John Q. Public and I will still be judged as not being qualified to speak about what this first responder space does to humans and how can we help each other care and figure that out. So back to your question, what blocks people? They first say, well, this would have been a much better training class if you were actually a dispatcher. And I'm okay. I'm not sure how, because what they're saying is I don't understand, but I actually do. And then there's also some of the traditionals want people to work like them and they label work ethic, and work ethic can sometimes be taken too far. Work ethic 68 hours a week, that's work too much. And so yes, you're getting a lot of work done and you're dedicated to it, but you're also having a health and wellness imbalance. And so if you look at, okay, he's not working as much as me and he's a lot younger, therefore he's a millennial and he doesn't have a good work ethic, they can flip that and say you're working too much and you don't have a good health ethic.
Oh,
And
yeah.
health wellness, you don't have a work life balance ethic. And they can flip that because people are trying to get work life balance and they're trying to protect their personal minutes and they don't like being forced in on their days off. And so what blocks people first is that some of that judgment exists. The judgment is because of their expectation of how that other person should be. And some of those expectations are valid. Don't get me wrong. Some people come in and they sit and they don't do their work, but they expect to get paid. And there's complacency in all age groups. So part of it's judgment, part of it's trying to get people to be more like them instead of understanding how they are. And then I think also a block to it is this negativity. It's easier for us to grow negativity instead of saying, how can I help you? And no one's helping me, so I have a hard time offering help. And the more we grow that help and that care for others, the more we reduce that negative growth and the more we reduce picking on each other. And we start to knock down those barriers. But if you're not treating people well, you start to grow resistance, and that's destructive and undermining, and it kills your morale on the floor. And if you allow complacency, then you create people in all age groups that don't go above and beyond, and they have a lack of motivation because they're not recognized when they do have a motivation. And so there's you're trying to see the people and grow the types of employees and energy that you want, and that means less judgment, less negativity, and calling out the rumors and the gossip and growing it. And it means recognizing and motivating and encouraging people. Then the barriers start to go down. When the barriers start to go down, you start to create leadership, teamwork, people fostering trust with each other, people that look to each other and have each other's backs, and you start reducing the divisiveness of shifts and age groups because you're growing caring and engaged and trusting people. And it takes, I think I said it 3 times already, it takes practice, practicing professionalism, practicing reducing what you're getting ready to say or think that's negative, and um, and then starting to practice the opposite of that. How can I help you? And where do you need support? And you're fostering that kind of trust. And those blocks happen between shifts, they happen between age groups, they happen between vendors and the comm center, us against them, and management and the floor, us against them. And I kind of look at it like, especially if I'm whiteboarding it, I start looking at it like, uh, bridge building, right? Let's cross the bridge and see how they are in the day in the life of them and care for them. And you'll hear stories that surprise you. People coming into work with a lot of stress and pain and suffering, and they're coming into work and also trying to do a very difficult job that has a lot of pain and suffering and stress in it, and it piles on. So that's why that care becomes so important.
So you answered my next question when we talk about the culture of an organization.
Hmm.
Um, Agencies can build a culture that's attractive to all generations,
Hmm.
but it takes time, and it has to be an intentional growth. It has to be an intentional change, not just from the leaders, right?
Hmm.
It has to it has to move all the way through the organization
Yeah.
intentionally. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it from the top down and from the bottom up. There's a couple of areas that need to be intentional: how we communicate, how we look at each other, eye contact, how we're um, treating each other verbally, body language, tone of voice. All those things start to play into it. It's intentional to listen to someone and care about them, even if you don't like them, and or you don't like their what you've perceived as their work ethic. And I'm not saying that everyone has fantastic work ethic. Sometimes people come in, they're complacent, they get away with not doing much, but what happens around them is it causes this resentment. So it has to be intentional, each person tying themselves and their participation to their work ethic, their energy, their engagement, their dedication. And so, if you look at it in a circle, self awareness is where you start. As opposed to starting with someone else and pointing the finger. So self awareness becomes that intentional piece. How am I doing? Am I selfless? Am I active? Am I engaged? Am I tired? Am I exhausted? Am I drinking too much? Did I feel unrecognized, and do I feel lack of confidence? So what are my challenges? And then we start creating purpose and goals and education and learning around that self-awareness. Where do I want to feel better? Do I want to be more flexible? Do I want to be more understanding and hospitable? And maybe I am stealing someone's lunch regularly. I could probably stop doing that first, as opposed to complaining about someone always late. So it does have to be intentional. And back to some of that judgment piece, I still remember that class where the lady was scoring on delivery. We had 2 instructors there, and we had workshop material going, and scored all fives on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, and it scored all fives. And on the way out the door, she said something about what agency did you work at? And I explained many agencies of 901 CAD radio training, sit-alongs, and over 25 years of this type of work. And she said, but wait, where were you a dispatcher? And I said, actually, that I don't have that. This is what I have to help you with this. And she took this score sheet back and out of my hand and set it down and circled all ones and
Oh,
handed it back to me. And so that's where we have to
wow.
start thinking about. There are a lot of folks helping this industry, and there are a lot of folks coming into this space that have different backgrounds and different experiences. And And if you open your mind to receiving help and needing help and less destructive, less undermining, less contagiousness of the negativity, then you start seeing the same is true for your new hires coming in and your staffing coming in, come from all backgrounds and all experiences and various levels of being able to get it and being able to do this work, especially if we're building up their strengths and their esteem and their confidence instead of finding every mistake that they make. And what did you do wrong on this shift? And that's where your mind starts to open to understanding and hearing and seeing people for how they approach a comm center, whether it's your vendor, your instructors, your new hires, your management. I've seen some very, very progressive managers come in from other industries, healthcare, communications, call centers, and be treated poorly because they didn't grow from the chair all the way up to management. Now, do they understand every single aspect because they didn't do that growth? No. But they do bring other things to the table that are necessary: technology, professionalism, um, and a different way of how we treat people. Because there are industries where they do not allow the type of unprofessionalism that's in a comm center, and they don't allow some of the things that people are willing to do to each other inside a comm center. And so that
Yeah.
fresh becomes very important.
Yeah. That's I'm just there's 1,000 examples I can back up
Yeah.
everything you're saying. So,
Yeah.
and I'm sure to our audience listening to this, they're thinking, "Yeah, yeah, that's right. We shouldn't allow this." But it is a cultural change. Um, but so our last 4 years have been, we've had some significant changes. And while I was doing research preparing for our topic today, I found so many articles discussing generational culture,
Hmm.
declining mental health,
Hmm.
coupled with rising rates of anxiety and depression among our younger generation. And I don't know how accurate just the younger generation is, but they've put it all since the pandemic. Um, in your work in this area since 2020, have you seen this trend to be true? And do you tie it together with the generational cultures that we're talking about?
Are you talking about rising anxiety being a trend?
Yeah. Yes.
Mhm. So I think it's rising, not only anxiety, there's a lot of attention to mental health and the quality of mental health and being able to ask for help in a way that's not a clunky EAP system. And people that understand 911, there's a lot of studies. There's a working group dedicated to writing papers and information, and that's within Nina's Wellness, um, to help people explain themselves to mental health practitioners or explain themselves to. There's a lot of research around how do I explain myself, or a lot of challenge around how do I explain myself, and then research with how to help people explain themselves to their doctors or mental health practitioners for the work that they're doing. And there is rising awareness to mental health, and you can see the rollout of 988, right, which was
Yes.
changing the suicide hotline to the mental health crisis number. And there's a working group dedicated to 988 and 911 working together, and how can we share information. So it there's awareness to that people need help, and they and asking for help is okay. You also see organizations get around peer support programs in a proper way, that confidentiality becomes very important and critical to the success of those programs. You see wellness groups growing, and Nina has a wellness continuum, and Nina.org, Nena.org, has a wellness continuum. and resources on there, not only for health and wellness, but good things to eat, books to read. There's some studies around, and this isn't particular to an age group. There's studies around the importance of putting down your devices and getting your eyes off of those screens and looking and conversing with people and hearing them and communicating and building those relationships and reducing that isolation. And so we want to look at the comm center and say, okay, wellness programs are good as long as we're not doing it as a checkbox activity.
Yeah.
And wellness is good for a group of people as long as you're self aware, creating purpose and goals around your learning and growing as a human. But then reliable behavior in, if you have wellness programs, you still need to be reducing your tolerance for toxic behavior. And toxic behavior can actually damage people in their mental health. So if we have a wellness program and a peer support program, but we're allowing toxic behavior to damage people's esteem and confidence and mental health, then we're not doing that full circle. We're doing things over here, but it's not working out on the floor because we're tolerating other things that do damage. So that's why we have to take those programs and that learning and growing and start creating reliable and consistent behavior and tolerating less the damage that we do to each other and elevating more caring and helping and teamwork and elevating that, fostering bonds of trust. And and so, you know, pandemic, um, it was a tough time for a lot of people. I get choked up thinking about some of the stories on how tough it was for some, but it also kicked the door open for this particular industry to see that things can be done differently, working from home, flexible work environments. There's even agencies that have set up positions where you can rip and run or set up a position in a different place so that somebody could work at a position and not call out sick and work there and still be part of the team but not use up all their sick time. And so you look at remote call taking and all the things that start to grow because the door was kicked open to do things differently. So if you flip it back to particular age groups, 78% of your generation coming in prefer a flexible work environment. And so if you run a poll also on traditionals and baby boomers, they actually have a large percentage of that age group as well that appreciates a flexible work environment, and they start looking at things differently. So the percentages might be written about one age group. As soon as you ask that same question of other age groups, they start to see the benefits of those things. They just wish they would have had them sooner. So I think it's a not, you can't just call it one thing, rising anxiety. I think there's a rising awareness to the need to pay attention to mental health, health and wellness, flexible work environments, and to tolerate less the poor behaviors.
Uh, and I think that's something I agree with you. The pandemic has certainly brought it to our the forefront of our mind, and I like the way you said kicked the door in. It didn't open it slowly; it kicked it right in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the technology has clearly changed over the years from when I started in the chair. Um, uh, Starting my career, we didn't even have computers, and now you know people of my experience level are, we're either sitting next to someone or supervising people who grew up with a phone in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
And that has
Mm-hmm.
a pretty profound impact on
Mm-hmm.
the PSAP. Um, how would you encourage leadership to pay attention and watch for signs of bullying in in the different generations?
Well, I know I've said this a couple times, but A leader that watches for signs of bullying but doesn't first look and see if they are one or
True.
are exhibiting this behavior doesn't do a comm center much good. So you have to start with self awareness. In order to notice something in others, you also have to notice it in yourself. And I often get notes in class that say, my bully's sitting right next to me, or how do I approach my supervisor? She's the worst one out on the floor, and so you're looking at the folks that need to start reducing and less toleration for that behavior in yourself, and then you can reduce it and tolerate it less in others. So when you're tying yourself to your work environment, we can't just send out managers with a little cheat sheet on here's what bullying is and they start pointing it out at people if in fact they're also participating in it. So there has to be leadership by example, making sure that we're exhibiting the behaviors that we want from others, that we're exhibiting discretion, which is recognizing and avoiding words, actions, and attitudes that bring undesirable circumstances. We first have to practice that discretion, and then we get to ask for it from others, and then we get to say truthful comments with, this isn't good for us, what we're doing right now, and we got to start saying what can we do about it instead, and what can we say instead. Um, I think it's important that when we talk to leadership, which is traditionally people that have grown up, sometimes being promoted because they're there the longest, we want to give them the skills and resources with which to do things differently. But we also have to kind of sit down and have a difficult conversation about how do we put well-being as a high priority as the work. And that has traditionally been imbalanced. Work has become priority over someone's well-being and mental health and stress management. So how do we prioritize well-being as equally as work, right? And it's a simple exercise. You take a blank calendar of your week and have them write the most important thing down first, and watch who writes work shifts first,
Hmm.
and then their to-do list, and then all of the things and activities, and then puts things for themselves last. But in a group of 100 people, somebody is going to start putting on their work, their gym, their workout class, their dinner with Sunday dinner. They're going to start putting them on their calendar first, and they might not put work shifts first. And watch the two people look at each other with, "Oh, you don't have a work ethic. Oh, you work too much." That's where we start, because that is a communication that starts the slow or sometimes very quick process into name calling and judgment and intimidation and talking down to people, and that's what breaks the trust. So you just start with some of those very simple things in reliable and consistent behavior and learning and growing, and then changing whatever piece of that circle is not working. And then it's a constant. It's not like a checkbox, one and done.
Right.
You really do need to be tolerating less the behavior from yourself and from others. I heard recently a really good comment. We were talking about when you hear people talking about each other out on the floor, and then the people aren't present that they're talking about, how it just tears them down. Um, Somebody will lean back, and they're all trained on being allowed to say it. Somebody will lean back and say, how about them Seahawks? And that's their cue that they've gone across the line, that they've gone from funny story to inappropriate discussion or gossip or rumor or negativity or non-truths. And it's their cue, and they're allowed to say it, and they all have an agreement. As soon as somebody says it, that means they've made someone uncomfortable and they need to change the topic, and they immediately pause. And I love that, because we've been talking about how to say it. That's not good for us, and we don't do this anymore. And how about them Seahawks? That's where it starts. And then leadership, noticing it and then backing it up, right? And not participating in it. Then there's reading a book and putting down your phone and taking a walk. And there's just ways to create a better mind space, because we can't ignore the reason they started talking negatively in the first place. Something happened that upset them, and what are our coping skills to deal with that upset, so that we're not taking a tiny little hangnail and making it, burn the house down. That's where we
Right.
have to start with self and then start growing that from there. And so leadership, looking for the signs, have to look for attitude, performance, trust, how people are speaking, and how they're speaking, and start asking for it to be a better language, a better tone, things that foster respect and trust.
That's great advice. I mean, because if that's not held in check, somebody with a with a hangnail, it's a bad attitude, they can bring the whole team down. Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mo. I do you have you've talked about some resources that are available to people besides NENA. Are there other resources that people could find that are specifically related to 911?
Yeah, there's okay. So let's talk about a couple working groups. I think sometimes folks pick their best employees to get involved, but more and more recently, I've watched at conferences people that have been in the industry 2 months and 1 year be allowed to go to conferences. And what a concept, and what a refreshing way to approach your team going to conferences, because you can have them get bit by the bug. Um, and so it's that constant engagement, and so you look at the resources. There's conferences, APCO NINA conferences, state conferences, and there's apps. There's free apps, and there's apps that charge way too much, and so my team's looking at a wellness app and a peer support app, and because we have over 100 traveling dispatchers now on our team, and they need peer support, and they need support, and they need constant engagement. So we often look to the wellness continuum at NINA, because you can go to that wellness continuum and get resources, and they're across all kinds of categories: relationships, food, career development. There's also in NINA Women in 911, which is co-ed, and a lot of resources on networking and professionalism and ways to be involved. APCO has a wellness group. Both of them have wellness workshops and pavilions in their conferences, and there's also vendors that come in and play in the space. There's Cortica. I think I said that right. I hope I said that right. And there's Lighthouse Peer Support app and Mindbase, and we're looking at those apps to see how we can better support our teams, even on our own side. There's also people that study and write papers and articles. 9-1 Wonder Woman provides really inexpensive workshops in all different kinds of categories: how to take care of your home life, and how to interview, and being a mom in this industry, or being how do you work your career towards being getting promoted, and practicing interviews, and so there's all these resources, and there's also continuing education, International Academy Emergency Dispatch IAED classes and certifications in your profession, emergency number professional, and RPL by APCO, where you get to study your profession and grow your career and put letters after your name, and be proud of your accomplishments as a center manager or a CTO or an emergency number professional. And so all of that is around changing your self esteem and your confidence, It is career goals that allow for you to have a lifeline to pull yourself forward and out of drowning in the stress. It's networking. It is respectful um, in networking and people caring about each other, acknowledging the efforts. And so all the resources mean nothing if you're not willing to go get them and do something about it and engage yourself. And when somebody gives you a class and you're not engaged in being interested in learning and growing, you have to come back and figure out if you've accidentally got compliant or complacent and you're not caring to learn and grow. So a lot of these resources are free. Some can be done on your own time, but you're going to have somebody that says, if you're not paying me to take training, then I'm not taking training. And that's kind of unfortunate if you're not interested in learning your own career path and absorbing it all like a sponge and figuring out what am I going to do next. You kind of lose some of the passion and joy and dedication around your workload and why you're doing it in the first place, to save lives and to make a difference in the community. So there's lots of resources. We have an online portal that has over 400 different types of classes, and we don't charge for those classes and by the hour or by the class. And we open up those learning paths with access to the portal, and you can see people just eat that up, and you can see people that never log in and do anything at all. And so that's where the resources need to be constantly messaged, repeated, offered, put in front of them, because there will be a day when they need it and they're going to be like, oh, where was that article that I think I need? Because they've had something happen to them or to
Right.
their someone they care about. And so from a resource perspective, there has to be constant media, constant messaging, constant different voices. There's all kinds of different voices out in the industry, so that one will attach to a voice they, oh, I heard that person. And they might have heard it 14 times from different voices, but it didn't resonate with them. And this message did. And now you've helped one more person. And that's why I'm a big fan of collaboration and people out in the industry that are attempting to help and study and offer those resources. And but the resources coming in front of you are going to lose its luster if you don't say, "Ooh, I should read this. Oh, I could go to that conference." And then
Right.
management that doesn't message probably should change the game on messaging all the things that are available to people now in this profession. And it's all because there's awareness to the first responder space and reclassification of the comm centers, and that's an important piece of it. So, communicating those resources and then hearing those communications and then engaging in it becomes interested and purposeful. And I got to tell you, being on several working groups, one of the constant challenges is, how do we engage people? We put this in front of them, and they don't go for a walk, and they don't read the book, and they don't do the hobby. And so then you got to speak to that individual. What are they doing on their time off to help themselves? And if they're not doing anything, we should show some concern for that and tell them the consequences of not engaging in some health and wellness, and checking their mental health and seeing how they're doing and engaging in that self-awareness. Because the person that says I'm fine is probably a person that needs help, right?
Right. 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 And I feel sorry or sad for the person you were talking about that changed all her evaluation numbers to one, because um, I feel like it doesn't matter. In fact, just before our podcast started, I was talking to one of my peers with Equiture about this very same thing. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry. You can always learn something. When I teach new dispatchers, I always tell them, I'm going to learn something from you in this class, and I always do. You have to have an open mind, just like when we're taking classes and we're learning from somebody who has never sat with a headset on.
Mm-hmm.
So what? You have so much valuable information, and it's a pity that she missed it.
Yeah,
Um,
I think, well, thank you for that. I kind of look at that as a learning exercise and making sure that I study voraciously and that I am not reading a book and regurgitating someone else's experience, and that I'm using real examples and stories and learning from it. And how can I resonate self care and reduce gossip and message that in a way um, that creates open mindedness, right? But I've had people challenge me, from comm centers or at conferences on what makes you qualified, and I think it's studying and it's being interested and relevant. But I also tie myself to my environment, and so I'm constantly in the comm centers with what's working, what's not working, what do you need in order to feel better and successful, and what's the pulse of the floor, and how can I help? And through those helps and stories is how we learn what we can do for each other.
That's great. Well, I sure do appreciate you being with us today, Mo, and
Thank you.
thank you so much for joining us. And for our audience today, if you have any questions, you can just look up either Equiture or Motivations and contact us that way. And thank you, everyone, and have a great day. And be
Thanks,
safe. Take
Cherie.
care of yourself.
Thanks, Cherie.
Bye.